Hi, welcome to the very first podcast for Dishing with Dr. Dewar. Pull up a chair because we're about to dig in on our very first topic, which is it possible to set boundaries without guilt? So I'm here with my good friend and colleague, Natalie Rhymes, owner of Envision Counseling. And actually, we've had this conversation before. And when I had the idea to do a podcast, this came to mind because there are so many people I think that struggle with setting boundaries. I've joked many times that I want to do a session and title it Bless Your Heart, Setting Boundaries for Southern Women, because I think it's just a struggle. Or it is for me. So self-disclosure, I'm doing all of these so I can learn things.
Well, hi. Thank you for having me. I have to know, what made you choose me for this particular topic and also for the very first episode? Thank you so much.
Okay, so first, I have a core memory. We were doing a supervision session and you were talking about your principal, or it wasn't your principal, but school staff was like, hey, we're getting together on Sunday to decorate and everybody needs to be here at this time. And you were like, wait a second, that is not my contract time. And I appreciate the invite, but I already had plans, whatever. And I thought to myself, what a novel idea, because I would have said, absolutely, I'll be there and I can bring all these things. And then I would have hung up and then told my husband, I'm going to have to do this. And now I have to change this and how frustrating it is. Right. And so I thought of you because I think you're really good at it.
Thank you.
Politely setting boundaries.
I don't know if I'm really good at it or if I'm just kind of a bitch. Can I say that? Is that okay?
It's on
Give me some
Spotify.
boundaries for our episode, please, because you have to tell me what I'm allowed to say, because you never know what's going to come.
We'll keep it PG-13,
So the B word's okay, but don't drop any F-bombs. Got it.
Please. But my vision for this, all of my episodes, is to have real conversations. We were discussing just a little while ago how it's really frustrating when people throw out an interesting topic and then they talk all around it and they never get to the thing that you were actually hoping to talk about. So before we go any further, I think it's important that we define boundaries, because I feel like, similar to triggered and self-care, it's been kind of thrown around a lot and maybe people could be confused about what a boundary actually looks like.
Absolutely. I'm going to go with Nedra Tawwab. I hope I'm saying her name right, with her definition of boundaries. And I'm going to throw a shout out. I don't know her personally. I'm not getting paid for this. I just really like her book. It's called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. Okay, so let's go with her definition. You can see that I've read it a couple of times, but I don't have it memorized. I'm not that good. So according to Nedra, what a boundary is it's an expectation that you set that keeps you safe and mentally healthy. So when she says safe, I think that she means emotionally safe, right? I guess in some cases it would be physically too. Expectations and needs that help you feel safe and comfortable in your relationships. How do you feel about that definition?
I think that's true, but I also think that that people get confused about is that a boundary is not something you're telling someone else they're going to do.
Right.
It's something that you will do in response, right? So I can't say, Natalie, you're not going to talk to me that way anymore, right? Because I don't control Natalie. You saw that, right? I'm kidding. But I can say, Natalie, if you speak to me that way again, then I'm choosing to leave. Yes. That's my boundary.
Exactly.
Or I can say, Natalie, if you continue to speak to me that way, then, I will hang up. We'll continue this conversation another time. Right. So a boundary is something that an expectation or something you put in place to keep yourself safe or to preserve your self-respect or keep your mental health, but not so much something that you can tell other people, if you don't do this, then you're not respecting my boundaries, because it's not about what other people are going to do. It is about what you will do in response. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree.
So then my next question, I think, is why is that so hard, right? Because I've been doing this for quite some time and I can talk about it all day long, but then I still find myself, maybe it's a matter of I don't respect my own boundaries, or I don't know. What do you think?
I think, honestly, so I do think, now that you're saying this, I do think I'm good at setting boundaries. Not perfect by any means. I think that learning to set healthy boundaries is it's like a balancing act, right? Because you can go too far on the other end too. So you've got to find that middle ground, whatever works best for you and feels right for you. But I think that it's hard for some people because they don't want to disappoint others. You want other people to like you and you want to make people happy. It's a little bit of people pleasing, maybe.
Yes, uh, I definitely identify with that.
So, and then it got me to thinking, why am I good at this? Well, probably because I used my childhood trauma to work to my advantage, right? Because when I was younger, I'm biracial, for those who don't know, half black, half white. And I was kind of, I don't know, outcast is the right word, but like there were people who didn't like me
Mhm.
from a very young age, whether it was because of my race or because I struggled with weight, so I got used to people not liking me at a very young age through no fault of my own. And so when I realized they're not going to like me one way, no matter what I do, it was very freeing because I realized, well, I'm just going to do what I want. I mean, they're going to like me or they're
Right.
not, and then the right people did like me and I was still me. And so I learned that at a really young age, I can be me and some people will still like me.
Yeah.
Maybe not everybody, but do I care about these people? Not really.
Yeah. Are they the right people to have in your life anyway?
Yeah, if I have to put on a show for you, if I have to be somebody other than my real self, what I want to be around you anyway.
Yeah. So that, yeah, this is not, let's not get into my therapy, but I do think similar. So, but opposite, my performance was how I was valued, or at least that's what I felt like. If I got an A, that's how I got attention, or if I did well in the school play, or if I, whatever. And so I think probably for some people, if you're like me, it's difficult to disappoint because it feels like that's where our value is. And if
Yeah.
I don't do these things, then similar, they won't so much they won't like me, but that's where my worth comes from, right?
Yeah.
That's something I'm working on.
We all
But
have stuff.
yeah, everybody has stuff. That's why we're talking about these things. And hopefully this helps somebody who's hearing it and they're like, me too. So your comments about learning from an early age, you either like me or you don't, that kind of completely understand where you're coming from. But I've also seen a trend lately, or it's trending on reels and whatever, kind of this argument for or against. So we're seeing a lot of people that are using I'm setting healthy boundaries as an excuse to cut people out, right?
Mhm.
So one of the things that I've seen a lot recently is people that are saying, now we have families that are just falling apart and parents that are grieving children that are still alive because they are setting boundaries. And now, I'm not coming to Christmas and you're not allowed at my house and all of these things. And you and I have talked about too, right? Because no parent child relationship or family is perfect. I've not found one yet. And there are going to be things. Now, certainly, I do think there are some situations where it's warranted, right? Like this has crossed a line. And, if there's a case of abuse or something of that nature, or, repetitive, really abusive things. But then there are other things that, it just really annoys me that my mom, coughs all night. So now that's not good for my sleep. That's not good for my mental health. So now they're not allowed at my house anymore. Like that
Yeah.
that feels like maybe we're misusing
Mhm.
the idea of setting a boundary.
Yeah, I'm sure there's truth to that. I think really and truly though, everybody has to decide for themselves. And we need to let people decide for themselves what it is, what their boundaries are, what's good for them because only you know what went on in your home with your parents. And what sounds to me like it's not a good enough reason could be there may be so much
Right.
more to the story than we know. But I see what people are saying, like, and I think this is why it happens. I think this is why people cut their family members off sometimes instead of setting a healthy boundary. It's because it's hard. It's
Mhm.
really, really hard to set a healthy boundary and enforce it because
Yes.
that's the thing. Like, you'll say, okay, mom or dad, I'm not going to talk politics with you. We're come to Christmas, but we're not going to talk politics. And if we do, I'm leaving.
Right.
So then what happens? You sit down at the table and
Here it goes.
here
Yeah.
they go. And you don't want to have to get up and leave. And you
Mhm.
end up staying and then you resent them. So I'm just giving an example, right?
Yeah. That's a good one though.
And so you cut mom or dad off, or you refuse to go to Christmas, and then they get on social media and say they're grieving the loss of their child,
Right.
right? But they're the one that broke the boundary. But so it's like that. It's so much harder to get up and walk away from the table, and then do it again the next Christmas,
Yeah.
right? And let's give them another chance. It's easier just to say I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Just let me have peace and live my life, and that's where the whole
Yeah.
protecting my peace thing comes from, right? But yeah, you have to decide though. It's your family, it's your life. You have to decide how many chances you're going to give and how many times you want to sit down at the table and be prepared to get up and walk out. But no, going into this, it's not a one and done thing. When you set a boundary, it's like you're going to set it and then you're going to remind them that you said it. And then you're going to have to do the thing you said you were
Yeah.
going to do when it happens, because they will test your limits. They will tiptoe around them. They'll try to emotionally manipulate you. They'll try to guilt you. It's just all the stops will be put out.
Sometimes, and sometimes it really is unintentional, whatever. But I think you brought up a really good point. And this is something, again, I've noticed several times because um, I will tell on myself. I think something I do is I will set a boundary in here and not speak it.
Yeah.
And then I will be really frustrated that that because again, a boundary is something I'm going to do in response to, right? But because I didn't say it out loud, I can't really be unhappy with them because they didn't respect it. They didn't know I had it. But then what happens is because I don't follow what I agreed to myself that I was going to do, then that resentment builds because it's like, here I am stuck dealing with this thing I said I wasn't going to do. So I think that's a really good point too. When we don't honor our boundaries, spoken or unspoken, regardless, you end up damaging relationships because now you're over here side eyeing whoever it is and they have no idea what you're upset about because you never had the conversation. So I know that's something that, again, I'm working on because I recognize it. But I think that's something that probably a lot of people struggle with is that follow through or even having the conversation in the first place. So something that I have brought up several times, let me see if I can remember it correctly. Unspoken expectations are premeditated resentments.
That's good.
Which basically, it's like if you're coming home and you're thinking to yourself, I really hope my husband folded the laundry, but you never asked him to. Then you're just preparing yourself to be mad that he didn't do it, even though you never said it out loud. So I think it's probably the same with boundaries. You can't be upset with people for not respecting them when you've never had the conversation in the first place.
And the way you say things too, even when you do say them. I was just reading that chapter about, I think it was in the relationship, because she goes into different, like how to set boundaries with your friends, coworkers, and there's a relationship one or marriage one. And she gave an example of a wife telling her husband, so he told her he was going to cook dinner and then he had to go to his mom's or something to do something. And she said, well, hopefully you'll be back in time to cook dinner like you said you would. And she said, that's not setting a boundary. That's a passive aggressive way of setting up an argument that's going to happen later. What she should have said was, okay, be back by 5 so you can cook dinner. Or if you're not, then pick up something on your way home.
Right.
I was like, ooh, I like that. That's very, this is what I need. State your needs clearly.
Yeah.
Because the way you say things makes a huge difference too.
Yeah.
That's what I need to work on, I think.
So I feel like this is going exactly the direction that I hoped it would, which is part of that is what makes it hard for us to say, what we need. What is it that makes it so hard? Is it because we are afraid that we'll be rejected? Like if I say, will you please fold the laundry? And he's like, no, I won't. That's probably not going to happen. I guess it could. Or is it because going back again to bless your heart, right?
Mhm.
I think that is just very much the way a lot of people are raised, that we shouldn't be demanding, but then we're still trying to. But it's worse than if you just said it outright. But I think sometimes, especially for and I mean maybe way off base for some people, but at least in my experience, being assertive comes off as rude to
Mhm.
many people. And
Yeah.
so in order to avoid sounding rude, then we skirt around or try to fluff it up. I remember, so my husband is very good at being very polite but direct. And he was driving, and there was somebody that was supposed to have fixed something on the vehicle. It wasn't done right. And he told me to call them, um, and basically let them know this was not done right and I expect it to be fixed. And when I called, I was like, hey, so, I think maybe this wasn't exactly like, I was trying to soften. And he was like, that is not what I said. But he was right, because the message was different. And I was not coming out with it and saying, look, we had an agreement, you didn't live up to your end of the deal. And instead, I was maybe if, right? Which then leaves the possibility for misunderstanding, and then just still being frustrated because my needs aren't met. I have colleagues that I really respect and admire for being very good at politely setting boundaries, right? And I think to myself, they just told me, like, I'm not available for that, but I can do this. I didn't hate them. I wasn't like, how rude. So I don't think that of other people, but then I still find it difficult to do myself sometimes for that reason. So I think sometimes we have to step back and evaluate, like, is our fear really valid? And then are we really doing ourselves any favors when we don't just say what we need and have the conversation?
For me, the benefit, knowing how I'm going to feel after I set the boundary is enough to get me past the discomfort of setting the boundary.
That's fair.
I'll give you a kind of a funny example. So I was invited to a bachelorette weekend in Fredericksburg, and we were doing wine tours and everything. And they all got this Airbnb. And so there's like, I don't know, 9 to 10 girls, women. I don't like Airbnbs. That's not my thing. Like, I want my own room.
Yeah.
I don't want to try to get there first to get the best room or bed or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
this is not MTV's The Real World. I'm a grown woman. Don't live in a dorm anymore. I just don't do that. Okay. So the way I chose to handle it was I paid the money. We all split the cost of the weekend or whatever. I paid my part, but I still got myself a hotel room. And when we got there, I remember walking in and saying, "Oh, this is so cute," and then I think I told the bachelorette, the bride, but the other girls didn't know. And so I said, "Yeah, I'm not." Somebody asked, "Well, which room are you staying in?" I was like, "Oh, I'm not staying. I got a hotel room." And the youngest one, I'll say she was probably like, I don't know, 23 years old. She said, "I didn't know we could do that." I just thought that was so funny. Like, yeah, you actually can do that.
Well,
You're a grown up.
so that's another really good point. When we're brave enough to set a boundary, sometimes that is how we break some of those generational things. It just takes one person to model, like, it's okay that this is not how we, want to be treated, or this is not how we want this to go, or
Yeah.
that we
And
want
we had
something
a
to be.
great time. I did all the other things. I went out to dinner. We went on the wine tours. And then at the end of the night, I went to the hotel room and I had my own peaceful space. And when you're a mother,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
my gosh, all you want in the world
Oh,
is
yeah.
just one night in a hotel room by yourself.
Peace. Watch whatever you want, listen to whatever you want, all of those things.
Oh, it was great.
Absolutely. So yeah, I think that's a really good point too. I didn't know you could do that. Yes, yes, you can.
Absolutely, you can. And you should.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we kind of talked about how can you be assertive and not rude, and I think you're right. A lot of it is how you phrase things, because you didn't come out and say, "I hate staying with a bunch of people. I'm not doing that." You just said, I prefer, right?
Mhm.
So this is what I'm in control of. I prefer to have my own space, really appreciate the invite, and I want to do all of the things, totally willing to, pay my part, all that. But this
Mhm.
is what I'm going to do so that I enjoy my trip too, right? Because I mean, that's what, when you're a mom, like that's your vacay. That might be the only one you get.
Yeah, I didn't tell them all the things I told you. They're going to hear our podcast, but I didn't say I'm a grown up. I don't do dorms, and I'm not. I didn't. I
Yeah.
just said, yeah, I got myself a room. I think I did say something about being the mom and wanting to have a
Yeah.
little time to myself.
Yeah. And you're right. Like the feeling you had after that, you enjoyed your trip versus if you ended up staying in a room that you didn't want to stay in, listening to, them partying all night, maybe when you wanted to be asleep or whatever.
That's the other thing. I'm getting old. Seriously.
We just went on a cabin trip and we truly did have the best time, but we got made fun of a lot because we were like, it's 9 and we're tired. Like I'm exhausted. Y'all don't make fun of me. I'm a early to bed, early to rise kind of gal. So I guess the overarching question that I was trying to answer today is, can you set boundaries without guilt?
Yes.
And do you have any tips for beginners?
Stop caring what other people think. Honestly, that is, I'll say that, and then I'll say visualize yourself, the feeling of freedom that you feel when you've set that boundary. And after you get past that awkwardness and you get to do the thing or not do the thing that you don't want to do. And it's worth it.
Yeah. So one question that occurs to me when you say that. So it's easier said than done, I think, to just not care what other people think.
Mm.
There are some people that's easy to do, and I don't have a problem with that. But then when you think about family members that you really do care about, or good friends that you really do care about, and you want to preserve that relationship, I think it's a little harder to just say, I don't really care what they think about it.
It's true.
So how do you think you can go about doing that and preserving the relationship, which I understand at some point we all have to recognize that we don't control other people, and it's possible that they will never accept, or they will not be mature enough to, and you just have to either, okay, well, I'm just going to deal with it, or I'm going to be done, or I'm going to enforce my boundary or whatever.
Yeah.
Regardless. But how do you think you go about, I'm trying to think of a good example. This was never really an issue for us because my family lives so far away. So when we go, we go. Right. But I know I have friends who are like, okay, well, we've always gone to my parents' Christmas morning, but now we have our own kids and we want to have our own space and our own traditions and our own time. So like in that example, how do you approach the parents and say, hey, you're going to do Christmas? Like my first thought is they're going to be so sad because nobody's going to be there, right? So
Yeah.
how do
You have to tell yourself, first of all, you are not responsible for the other person's reaction to your boundary.
it's true.
And you might have to repeat that over and over and over. You do the best that you can. You try to, make it some sort of compromise, whatever you decide to do, whether you're staying home on Christmas and then you either go before, you go after, whatever your thing is that you decide, you let them know, you communicate it, but you go into it knowing they are going to react however they're going to react. You cannot control that, and you're not responsible for it. You are only responsible for setting the boundary. And whatever happens after that is what it is.
That's what happened. So I guess kind of to boil it down, you have to be comfortable with your boundary and willing to live with whatever that brings,
Yes.
basically. I think then it's important to choose your boundaries carefully, right? Like we don't want to walk around saying, well, if you do this, and to the point that we have no family or friends, but also we want to avoid kind of living in a constant state of resentment because we're doing everything for everyone else and never respecting our own wants and needs and things like that. I think
Yeah. That's why I think it feels kind of like a balancing act,
Mhm.
like walking a tightrope, or let's say a balance beam. That sounds better.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
as difficult, right? But it does. It feels like, because you can go too far, and you probably will when you first start.
Yeah.
You probably will mess up, and maybe you went too far. Maybe you could have given a little bit more, but that's how you learn. You just have to get out there and try, right?
Yeah. Well, and going back to your other point, people that care about you and people that truly value you and your opinions and your feelings, they'll stick around regardless of whether you want to stay in your own hotel room. or not. Right.
And then you learn some important lessons about who's really supposed to stick around and who's not. Because if
Yeah.
somebody leaves because you set a boundary, something that really matters to you, chances are that relationship was already on the verge of not being.
Right. Or you were giving way more than was being reciprocated if you were constantly having to be the one to compromise. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Well, I think that I'm just gonna put Natalie in my pocket and I'm gonna let her out when I need to set a boundary. No, I really I think this has been a great conversation and I really appreciate you being my guinea pig for my very first
Mm,
episode. And hopefully this has been helpful to anyone who has listened. Maybe you've gotten something from it or maybe a little courage or some insight into what it looks like to set a healthy boundary. So
Thank you for having me. We should do this again.
yeah, oh, we absolutely will. This will be great.